Oh hey. Over the past 2 years, I've gotten more than 220 million views on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. But what I learned in that time about how short-form media like TikTok, Reels, and YouTube Shorts work wasn't just interesting, it was, well, kind of terrifying. And in a totally different way than the classic, oh, you're addicted to your phone, it's ruining your life way. Because, yeah, even though most of us already know that TikTok is really great and has had absolutely no sketchy nonsense go on in the past few months, somehow it's even worse. Some would say the end of truth as we know it levels of worse. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. Now that I'm TikTok's #1 supervillain, I'm going to expose them. And all the other short-form content. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to rip back the curtain of sorts, or rather, of shorts, and show you the skeletons in their closets. And all their little bones. And if I have to put Subway Surfers or some sort of weird AI ASMR slop in the background of this video to keep you engaged, I will do it. No, I won't. Who are we kidding here? I'm way too freaking lazy for that. So if you're new here, or if you're still catching up from Yellow Cake Gate a couple of weeks ago, my name is Becca, and I create videos about art history and toxic paints here on YouTube and previously on TikTok, with the goal to make people realize that art history isn't just super important, it's also wildly interesting and often way deadlier than we think it is. But although most of the deadly subjects I've worked with in the past on this channel are deadly in the way that they contain arsenic or uranium, I'm doubtful that poisonous paints from the 1800s are ruining a lot of people's lives at this particular point in history. But TikTok and other short-form content definitely is, and in a lot more ways than you're probably thinking. So without further ado, let's expose them. But first, a bit of backstory. See, if you weren't around a couple of weeks ago, I released a video where I talked about how I had been off TikTok for the past couple of months because I became the target of a harassment and misinformation campaign run by an internet stalker who made over 85 videos about me over the course of about a month, spreading false information and accusing me of serious crimes. These videos got over 1 million views, and in the course of these videos, they shared information with their viewers about the location that I live, and led to me receiving hundreds of threatening comments and messages, and I ended up having to talk to the police, and it was just a bunch of crap, okay? And although it sucked to be on the receiving end of such hateful and targeted misinformation, and trust me, it really freaking sucked, it also led to me realizing something. Watching TikToks and other short-form media has fundamentally changed the way that people use and interact with information online, often in dangerous ways. But what's worse is it's not necessarily the actual information being presented on TikTok that's the problem here. It's TikTok itself, and the message it's been sending us since the very beginning. TikTok itself is the message, and the message has to do with the way that we perceive truth itself, and the way that we perceive the world around us. It's about getting way too much information, and simultaneously not enough information to actually understand anything at all. And the weirdest part? TikTok and its effects on people were predicted half a century before it even existed.
They're so embellished or so flooded with data, with information, that they tend to protect themselves by switch off.
As somebody once said, children now become gray at 3. They have acquired so much information about the world by the age of 3 that they're in a sense senile. There's a new kind of humor that exists in America called the one-liner. We used to have jokes, stories, but no more, only one-liners now, and there isn't time to tell jokes in America, and nobody would be listening at the end of the joke.
Welcome to McLuhan's TikTok. But before we get too far into how we're being suffocated by TikTok, let's talk about how we're being suffocated by the news. Shall we? Oh hey, it's me, Landscape Rebecca, here to talk to you about today's sponsor. If you haven't heard of Ground News, they are an app and a website founded by a former NASA engineer that focuses on improving people's lives by helping them to see where the biases are in the news they read, and combating those biases with the perspectives they might be missing out on. Take, for instance, this news story about Trump proposing massive budget cuts for NASA. Turns out, similar information can be presented very differently, depending on who's giving it to you. In this story, you can see that the majority of news reports are from left and center-leaning sources, which means people who mainly read right-leaning news might be missing out on it entirely. On Ground News, you also get context into which sources have a high factuality rating. In a world inundated with news headlines, it's important to be able to know where your reading is coming from. Information is power, and ultimately, Ground News makes you a more powerful consumer by allowing you to think more critically about the news that you read every single day. But don't take my word for it. If you want to figure out what your algorithm isn't telling you about the insanity going on in our country at the moment, check out Ground News. To subscribe, click my link in the description, scan the QR code, or go to ground.news/brush to get unlimited access to their Vantage plan at 40% off. There's lots of news out here, so let's read the good stuff, shall we? Now, back to the video. Where were we? Oh yeah, some guy named McLuhan, and how his grave would probably burst into flames if he knew about how we're handling TikTok over here in the 21st century. So Marshall McLuhan was a popular Canadian philosopher in the 1900s, and shoot, we already lost some of the Gen Alpha. Was it Canada? Philosophy? 1900s? Let me see if I can just put up a slime video and do a 30-second scenario so that we can just try and condense this as quickly as possible. Marshall McLuhan was a Canadian philosopher who's largely considered to be the creator of media studies, aka the field of study that deals with the content, history, and effects of various media. Go figure. So, McLuhan's most famous theory by far is the idea that the medium is the message. And what he meant by that was that the medium a message is communicated through, whether that's a radio, a painting, a TV show, a newspaper, a drawing, a podcast, a TikTok, a subpar YouTube video essay, etc. That medium is the actual message, rather than the information that that media contains. The message isn't the content itself, it's how the content, presented in a certain format, changes us, and how we perceive and interact with the world around us. For example, take streaming services. Gosh dang it, I need a drink real bad. With a lot of platforms like Netflix, instead of dropping one new episode each week like they used to do on mainstream TV, they'll just dump a whole season, or even series, on you all at the same time, which leads to a bunch of changes in how we've consumed media as a society. Oftentimes, we binge everything in rapid succession, not just because we want to avoid spoilers, but because that's how these new shows are being designed and written, with the intent that you'll be watching a ton of it all at once. Because if you don't watch it soon enough, you won't be able to keep up with the conversation. Rather than an anticipatory, ongoing event, streaming services like Netflix are flattening storytelling into a single, disposable experience, meant to be wolfed down in one huge media mukbang and then thrown up later on some dark corner of Reddit. So then, Marshall McLuhan might say that the message of Netflix, how it reshapes society, is its encouragement of prioritizing binge-watching a show, often alone, over watching it with others, or engaging with a piece of deep sequential storytelling. It turns TV into something that's less of a group event or cultural discussion, and more of a default, just kind of taking up the time. Netflix makes TV lonelier. So then, what is the grand message of short-form media? Especially through McLuhan's eyes. What are things like TikTok and Instagram Reels telling us just by the nature of how they're laid out and how they function? Forget about influencers. How are these apps influencing us? And why the heck am I yapping about it on an art history channel? Well, let's talk about it. So first, let's address the art history channel thing. Hi, hello, this is an art history channel. But I solidly believe that media history and art history are like fraternal twins. After all, what is the Raft of the Medusa but a scathing commentary video on a tragedy that could have been prevented by the country's current leadership just making better decisions? What is The Swing but a book talk book? What is the Garden of Earthly Delights if not the 1500s version of Netflix's Black Mirror? No, seriously, what is it? What's going on? My point is, it's all connected here. So that being said, let's get back to TikTok. One of the first things that immediately jumped out at me when I was learning how to make short-form content was how fast everything is.
If a TikTok or Reel can't capture your attention within a couple of seconds, you just keep scrolling. As you digest more and more short-form content, the platform you're consuming it on is literally training you to expect these snappy, ridiculous engagement bait openers, or to just keep scrolling until you find something that grabs your attention.
Every post we scroll by is like the ring of a bell, and we're the dogs, salivating in anticipation of the sweet little treat that is content based on the dopamine rush of instant gratification. TLDR, if you're not a Pavlov girly, TikTok and other short-form media literally trains us to be more impatient and dopamine-seeking in our consumption of media. It purposefully lowers our attention span and gives us sweet little treats in the process so that we stay on it for as long as possible. The problem with this is that activities that give us instant gratification aren't usually giving us any gratification in the long term. So instead of being left with a warm, fuzzy feeling after consuming hours of TikTok, you're left with a sense like something is missing, which only seems to alleviate itself when you watch more and more and more and more. Which is great for TikTok and other short-form media stars, but it's horrible for your mental health. In part because like breeds like. When it's harder to get off social media, it's harder for you to get off your couch and call your mom. Or go bowling with your friends. It's harder for you to go to work. It's harder for you to eat healthy because you don't have the time. It's harder to quit vaping because you have apps that are encouraging addictive behavior in every aspect of your life. Everything is harder because scrolling is so easy. Oh, and speaking of mental health, short-form content rewards things that are visually or audibly striking over everything else, which means that style, persona, beauty are immediately pushed forward, and authenticity just doesn't really cut it anymore. People end up agonizing that they don't look like influencers that they see on short-form content, often not even realizing that the creators themselves are using video editing to essentially create deepfakes of themselves and their own homemade personas that look just like them. Just a little slimmer, or curvier, or buffer, or cooler, or prettier, or healthier, etc., etc., etc. Now, are they alone in this boat? Obviously not. You and I create personas every day. It's how we market ourselves to the people around us. Take me, for example. Do you really think I curled all of my hair? Abso-freaking-lutely not. Ta-da! And that's just one piece of the puzzle. But an algorithm that values aesthetics so highly can't value authenticity on an equal playing field. And so it ends up being that if you ain't cute, you get the boot. Now, to its credit, one amazing thing about short-form content is its potential for leveling the playing field for small content creators and startup businesses. TikTok isn't all bad. Unlike traditional media, anyone can create and amplify content, which shifts some of the power from big media companies to individuals, like me. Also, the app's technical limits and time constraints can actually encourage innovative storytelling and the advancement of creative expression. Pretty much anyone who has time to research, experiment, and create something can share that with people and drive forward culture in their own small way, including advocating for different causes like ending war or helping those in need. Because it prioritizes sensational content, things that have tremendous social and political value can often break through the endless barrages of TikTok dances and NPC streams. And this content does, again to the credit of short-form content, create a really cool sense of community and advocacy that we've seen in cases like women's rights, or what's going on in Gaza right now. But a community of millions of people and an algorithm that prioritizes outrage can also go horribly wrong. Huge double-edged sword here, but because trends and stories can spread across millions of people in a matter of hours, any nuance in a situation tends to get lost in the process. In the best case scenario, that means people see something that's cool, but probably aren't getting all of the information that they could about the situation. But in the worst case scenario, it creates witch hunts, where keyboard colonists try and hunt down and drown everyone they think has wronged society in some way, even when their evidence is based off of false information. And yeah, take it from someone who was the center of a smear campaign. A supposed nuclear villain in a situation that reached hundreds of thousands of viewers. Heck, take it from my comments feed when I say that when something goes viral, people don't really fact-check things they hear in short-form media nearly as much as you would like to hope. For as much as we joke about old people not knowing AI from reality in those cheesy Facebook posts, a lot of people, including those who consider themselves the most empathetic or the most tech-savvy, don't do a good job of verifying the truth of statements made online, especially in short-form media. And if you've been on the other side of that, as someone who was falsely accused or ostracized because of another person's misinformation, you know that oftentimes when a mob surrounds you, it's stones first, questions later. That's the problem with a global village. It can become a global mob, and one where all of the media kind of just swirls together with no context or backstory. And when you have this swirling miasma of a feed that you're scrolling through where it's like a video of a makeup tutorial, then Donald Trump doing something Donald Trump would do, then an unboxing of the latest Sunny Angel figurines, then a fundraising live stream for victims of the California wildfires, then a dog video, then someone's luxury car and how they're better than you, then a big fat juicy pizza mukbang, then statistics on how youth suicide rates in the USA have risen 64% in less than 20 years, and then a happy little cat crunching on a piece of cardboard. Things can start to feel pretty numb. The point is, when your brain is constantly forced to switch back and forth hundreds of times over the course of less than an hour, things start to get weird. The importance of different pieces of information is diminished into 15-second fun facts. Politics become memes. Economic disparities become dark humor. Everything is ephemeral. Nothing is of lasting value. You're left with no context, no fulfillment, and no time, because dang it, it's time to go back to work again. And so the cycle continues, and has since the pandemic. So how do we get past this as a society? I have no idea. But if you're like me, you limit your screen time. You fact check everything. You read a book. You take a walk. You pet a cat. You watch a show with a friend. You touch hands and touch grass and try your best not to touch on things in your conversations that might make others around you feel unloved or unwanted. And you keep reaching out and trying to make the content that you want to see in the world. And you keep going. See you next time.